Over the past few months, I have been using the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K as both an A and B camera on a variation of projects, including short films, documentaries and music videos. So here are my thoughts about the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K. So since its release, this little camera here has been grabbing a lot of people's attention. Firstly, as you can see, it's small. It shoots Blackmagic RAW 6K 50 frames per second. It has dual native ISO, and it finally has a super 35mm industry standard sensor inside it. Now all of that for around £2,000. Now to me, I think that is an absolute steal. The camera body itself is just 900 grams. This is because it's mainly made from a carbon fibre polycarbonate material. On one of the sides you have a headphone and microphone jack, a full HDMI out, a 12 volt power input, a USB-C input and output, and a mini XLR with phantom power. On the other side you have an SD card slot and a CFast card slot, which is used for higher data recordings. On the top of the camera you have a 1/4 inch mounting point, dual microphones, a speaker, power button, record, picture capture, ISO, shutter and white balance buttons. On the bottom of the camera there is a battery compartment and another 1/4 inch mounting point for tripod and mounting plates. On the back of the camera there is a full HD 5-inch LCD touchscreen display, an iris and focus button, and below them you have a high frame rate, a magnification, menu and playback buttons. At the front of the camera you have a scroll wheel for changing the aperture, another record button for the front. Inside the camera hides a 21 megapixel high dynamic range 17:9 super 35mm sensor. This has a crop factor of around 1.55 when you're using the full amount of the sensor on 6K resolution. So it has all the inputs, outputs and accessories you'll need for both a run and gun and a professional setup. But you should never judge a camera on its inputs and outputs. But before you even think about buying or using this camera, I think it's important to answer probably one of the most important questions of them all. Does this camera produce a nice image? Just like most cameras, it definitely has the capabilities to capture some amazing looking footage. These images here were all captured using only the natural light, and the way the camera handles the range of light and colour is very impressive, just as you would expect from a cinema camera. So the Blackmagic records in something called a flat image profile. Now this gives you the full amount of dynamic range from the sensor. This will, however, require you to grade the images within post. The slow motion capabilities of this camera are quite impressive. Here are some shots I got in the forest at 120 frames per second full HD. Shooting lower resolutions with higher frame rates does mean that the image is further cropped. Although this can be seen as a problem, sometimes it can come in quite useful. Here for example, an 85mm lens looks like a 200mm. So the sensor gives you 13 stops of dynamic range, which is plenty enough to play with in post. Now, you put raw recording on that and it gives you even more flexibility. So how good is the camera's low light performance? Well, it has something called dual native ISO, which basically means it will get rid of a lot of the noise or grain from your images if you're shooting higher ISOs. Let's have a look at this clip here. This is a street at night, which is only lit by the street lights. Now the camera is on 25 frames per second, 180 degree shutter at t2.8. The ISO value is at 1000. And if we zoom into this image, you can see all of that horrible grain and it looks pretty nasty. However, look what happens when I up the ISO to 1250. Look at how much the grain clears up. And this is because once you start using an ISO value of 1250 or higher, the camera will automatically switch to a brand new circuit board. which effectively gives the camera a brand new base or native ISO of 3200. As you can see here, switching to a new ISO also changes the dynamic range of the camera. On ISO 1000, there was significantly more stops in the highlights. However, on ISO 1250, there is clearly more dynamic range in the shadows. This is because when the camera changes to a new digital circuit board, the middle grey area of the image is shifted up. This gives you less range in the highlights, but more range in the shadows or lower grey areas of the image. So if you're shooting in very low light conditions, there are many more benefits in shooting ISO 1250 than ISO 1000. Take a look at how this image changes whilst we pump up the ISO. So as you can see, the low light capabilities this little camera has are quite impressive. You can use this for documentaries or any scenes with low or limited light. However, because it's a cinema camera with a cinema sensor, it does require light to capture the best image possible. So personally, I wouldn't shoot over 6400 ISO with this camera, although if you were to shoot that or more, the image will still come out quite clean. Next, let's take a look at what this camera can capture. Now, because it's a Blackmagic, all of the best recording capabilities are done within the camera itself. Now, this is fantastic because this means you don't have to buy or even carry around with you external recorders or other devices. This camera can shoot either Blackmagic RAW or ProRes in a large selection of frame rates and resolutions. For the highest resolutions, frame rates and image quality, shooting Blackmagic RAW is your best option. Blackmagic RAW can shoot resolutions from 2.8K all the way to full 6K. The bit rate of the recording can also be changed from 3:1, where you get the most quality, all the way to 12:1, where you get less quality but more recording time. In ProRes, you can shoot resolutions from Full HD to DCI 4K, again in different bit rates, HQ being high quality and Proxy being the lower quality footage. So here are a few resolutions and frame rates that you may be interested in. So you can shoot full 6K Blackmagic RAW 3:1 at 50 frames per second. If you want this in 60 frames per second, then you have to use the 6K windowed mode. The best RAW slow motion you'll get is 2.8K resolution, Blackmagic RAW 3:1, and this will reach 120 frames per second. On DCI 4K, you can shoot ProRes 422 HQ at up to 60 frames per second, and in Full HD, you can shoot ProRes 422 HQ at 120 frames per second. Now, whilst these resolutions, frame rates and formats are great, it does mean that the footage which is captured from this camera is very, very heavy. For example, let's say you put the camera on the highest setting, so Blackmagic RAW 3:1, 50 frames per second, 6K resolution. Well, this will fill a 128GB card in approximately 3.5 minutes. Now, this means three things. Number one, you need plenty of fast and often expensive SD and CFast cards to record the footage. Number two, to edit the footage, you need a high-speed computer or you need to use a proxy workflow. And number three, you need a lot of hard drive space. So, if you're shooting wedding ceremonies or long conference videos, then you'll probably be wanting pre-compressed MP4 files which are really easy to edit with. And therefore this camera isn't for you. However, if you're wanting really nice quality cinematic imagery and you don't mind paying for these extra things, then this might be the perfect camera for you. If you find CFast cards too expensive, this camera allows you to use portable SSDs to record the footage onto. They're fast, reliable, and often much cheaper than CFast cards. Now, one of the things I like in general about Blackmagic cameras is their super intuitive and simple menus. And Their menus are pretty famous for that. Now, I've used a lot of different brands in the past: Sony, Canon, Panasonic, Arri, Infinity, you name it, I've used them. And I must say, the Blackmagic menu system is the best by far. Now, this is really important because when you're on set and you wanted to change something quickly, you don't want a complicated system. Let's take a look at the quick menu which is displayed on your monitor screen. In the top left, there is a quick access monitor button. Here you have quick access to zebra, focus peaking, frame guide, grids and crosshairs, and false color. At the top of the monitor screen, you also have quick access to frame rate, shutter angle, time code, ISO, and white balance. At the bottom, you have a histogram, quick access to your recording media, and audio levels. On the main menu, you have your record tab. Here you can change your format and resolution. On the next page of the record tab, you have more settings like image flatness, sensor area, and project frame rate. On the monitor tab, you have more controls over exposure, focus, and framing features like false color, peaking, and frame guides. But this time you can customize what you can view on your external monitor through your HDMI. You also have tabs for your audio, presets, and lookup tables. The camera is powered by these batteries here, Canon LP-E6s, and a fully charged one of these will make the camera run for around 35 to 45 minutes. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but do remember that these batteries here are powering a lot of camera. However, if that's a problem for you and 45 minutes doesn't seem like enough time, then there are a couple of solutions. The first solution is a V-mount battery. However, this does add size to your rig, and if you want to keep your rig nice and small, then take a look at this solution. This is the tilt-aside power handle, and it allows you to use Sony NPF batteries to power the camera, and they last significantly longer. What's more is that they are hot swappable. When replacing the NPF battery, the camera will automatically start using the LP battery inside the camera to power the system. So the screen is a Full HD 5-inch touchscreen display with approximately 500 nits of brightness. Now 500 nits is fine for when you're inside on studio shoots or you're outside and it's a cloudy day, but when it's sunny, 500 nits never seems to be enough. Whilst the monitor on the back is absolutely fine, the main problem I have with it is that it's stuck on the back, and it reminds me of the 5D days where you're struggling to see your image because it doesn't rotate and it doesn't articulate. However, there is a solution again from Tilta. It's really promising to see so many companies create accessories for this camera. I do feel as though a lot of companies are investing in Blackmagic and the Pocket Cinema Camera range. Having watched this video, do you feel as though this camera is right for you? Now, although you get a lot for your money with this camera, it is still quite a big investment nonetheless. The camera is very versatile, and it's been designed to be customized into whatever rig you want it to be. So if you need a run and gun setup or a professional 3-man rig, this camera can do it all. The sensor size is good for the price of the camera, and the 1.55 times crop factor should be familiar to people who use traditional industry standard cinema cameras. Overall, the image quality and recording capabilities are great. 13 stops of dynamic range from the sensor is good and gives plenty of room in the shadows and highlights. The flexibility to record internal Blackmagic RAW or ProRes on a large selection of frame rates and resolutions is fantastic, but high data recording is expected. The slow motion capabilities are impressive, but crop can become a problem at higher frame rates. The low light capabilities are absolutely fantastic because of the sensor's dual native ISO system. The menu is also fantastic. It's easy to use, even to people who have never used Blackmagic cameras in the past. The battery life is slightly disappointing, but this can be easily fixed with a few inexpensive solutions. The screen on the back has a great resolution, and its sensitive touchscreen capabilities makes moving through the menu and using the camera an absolute dream. However, it's only 500 nits, and it's stuck to the back with no rotating capabilities. But these problems can also be fixed. Some of the improvements I would give the camera would be to have a slightly larger sensor with internal stabilization. This would make this a perfect camera. It does not have built-in ND filters, so when you go out on a shoot, especially when you're outside, make sure you take some ND filters with you. Improved rolling shutter would also be nice, but personally, the rolling shutter has never been much of a problem for me. Overall, it is a really nice camera. It's small, it's practical, and you get an awful lot for your money. I would recommend this camera for semi-professional filmmakers on a modest budget. It's perfect for short and feature films, music videos, and experimental films. So there you go, my thoughts on the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments below. Thanks for watching. To help us bring you more content, please support us by subscribing to our channel.